Hi, welcome to GCS Connect Inclusion. Today I'm excited to introduce Maryse Gordon. Maryse Gordon joins me for a chat about her career and the love and life of her jobs and the various different things that she's gone through in the sense of inclusion. So without any further hesitation, here's Maryse.
Hi, Maryse has joined.
Maryse, I've done it again, haven't I? I've done it again. We only
Maryse,
just spoke about that.
about it. It's all right, forgive you.
I did warn you.
Well, yeah, Marcy
um,
couldn't make it, but Maryse is here, and I'm very happy to be here with you guys.
Maryse, thank you so much. First of all, happy International Women's Day.
Yes, happy International Women's Day. Thanks for having me on the show for this time.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. So, what I'd like to do is just get you to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of an introduction about about what you do and who you are.
Great. So my name's Maryse Gordon. I work in partnerships and business development currently at a firm called RepRisk. So they are an ESG data science provider company. I've just returned back to London after a good stint out in New York. I was prior to this working at the London Stock Exchange for 10 years. My background is very much in the space of technology and software development. And I also now work in the space of ESG and data sustainability.
Fantastic. So you've had quite a journey in your career so far. Tell us about the transformation from New York to the UK. How's that gone down for yourself?
So returning from New York to the UK has been great. I think it came at a time where I was, just done all I could in the States, and I was looking for the next kind of step in life. The actual physical transition was an absolute ordeal. Like, you try to get rid of a mattress or any kind of furniture in the New York apartment, it's awful. So I really did struggle with that, and just the whole coordination of everything, packing up your life and sorting out your taxes and your finances, and then shipping all your furniture and then finding a home. Like, it's a lot, but I'm really
Mm.
excited to be back here in the UK. Definitely feels like home.
And how long did you live over in New York for? And were you in Manhattan or were you in the suburbs?
I was in Manhattan. I was in Battery Park, like right at the bottom by
Oh,
like Wall Street and Financial District, and I was there for 6 years.
wow, that's an incredible amount of time. I always thought that when I was younger that I would love to have lived in New York just for a year, just to sample what life was like there. Can you give us a bit of a flavour on some of the things that you experienced and sort of like the part of your career in the time that you spent in New York?
Of course. So, I mean, like you, I thought I'd be there for 2 years. And then after 2 years is a time when you actually feel like you're settled. You like to be rooted up and leave would be awful. So I was glad I was able to
Yeah.
kind of endure it for a lot longer than that. So, I mean, yeah, just the transition to another country. And I guess the benefit for me was that it was another English speaking country. So I didn't have that barrier to entry. It was just purely about embedding yourself into this new culture and this new way of working and living. But you definitely have these like roller coaster of emotions. So you kind of start off thinking, oh wow, this is amazing. And then you're like, how much is this bread? Like things like and then you're like, oh, this is great, like another rooftop, and you're like, another rooftop. It's just this kind of up and down fluctuation because you're just in this new environment. So you're trying to understand a new culture, a new way of living. Some of them are positive, some of them are very negative, particularly depending on where you come from. You're trying to
Mm.
make new friends, and I think as adults we're not very good at making new friends, so that's a new thing you kind of have to really throw yourself back into. And then you're trying to establish a new routine as well, right? The simple things like, where do you get your shopping, where do you go to the gym, where do you hang out, and then on top of that, trying to build this new career and this new way of living and learning. So it was a tremendous experience. I mean, I'd highly recommend it to anyone who can have that international exposure to definitely do so. And New York is a crazy, wild place. I found myself disappearing as much as I could sometimes.
Oh, really? It's sort of like just going outside just to basically escape some of the madness of New York City?
Yeah, just to find peace. Like, you travel upstate New York to go hiking, or America's such a big country. You can fly over,
Yes.
and you're still in the same place, but you're in a totally different landscape and totally different, state, really, which sometimes feels like another country. So a lot of that kind of just exploring and just removing yourself from the madness of New York was really, really helpful, and a great opportunity experience as well.
And before you went to New York, did you live anywhere else in the sense of trial other countries? Did you go travel Europe at all, or did you literally go from UK to New York?
From a living perspective, yes, London to New York, but I've traveled a great deal. I think, I've been traveling for many years by myself as well. And I've pretty much touched most continents on this planet. Couple missing, maybe one missing, I can't remember. But yeah, I'm a really great traveler, so I always felt and knew that I would be working internationally at some point in time. I just didn't know where.
Fantastic. And how did you find the perception of culture within a working environment as a woman and as a woman of colour, if you don't mind me saying so? How was that culturally taken to you with regards to New York, to the difference in London or the UK, wherever you were based before?
So I mean, while I was in America, there was a lot of things that were happening from a social perspective and also within like the corporate world regarding females, gender diversity, and then ethnicity, Black employees. So I was kind of part of it from the beginning, and also inside and outside of it as well, right? So I was from the UK. I've been brought up in the UK. I don't think I've ever really faced any kind of real adversity from being a woman or Black. And if I have, I've probably just either ignored it or just been like, all right, well, that's your problem, not mine.
Yeah,
So it
great
hasn't
attitude.
yeah, it hasn't really, I don't think it really kind of affected me. However, when I did move to the US, that was the first time I generally felt very different.
In what
And
way? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
because it's just a very heightened it's a heightened topic in the US, racism and disparities between different communities of people there. And I mean, it happens definitely everywhere in the world, but I
Of
think it's
course.
a very prominent thing in the US. And maybe for me, it was just heightened because my ears and my brain wasn't really that in tuned with it. It was kind of a thing that happened, but it wasn't really hugely impacting my life. And I think once I got over there, I felt very much embedded into that culture and that way of being and that way of thinking and that type of perception. So, from a cultural perspective, I was faced with the whole George Floyd murder and the impact that had
Of
on
course.
society there, and then the impact of that like rolling into the corporate world, and then the changes regarding like diversity and inclusion. So that was all a part of my life that I experienced in America, but
Wow.
as a British female. So it was just a bizarre it was just a bizarre but I learned a great deal from it, and I think I was able to offer a lot of new ways of thinking and new kind of perceptions on stuff. And I can take that back to the UK as well now that I'm back here as well.
No, absolutely. And could you explain a little bit more to us about your work in ESG, particularly around sort of like sustainability? Would that be all right to go into?
Yeah, definitely. So I just moved to this new company maybe 3 months ago now. And I, just before I'd left the stock exchange, I was determined to really pivot my career into the space of sustainability, however that may be. And so I'm really pleased to have landed in the largest ESG data provider for risk management. So my role is specifically looking at partnerships and business development for the organization. So alongside organic growth that we have through normal sales channels, we have this partnership unit, which is around looking at strategic partnerships that we can have with other organizations, whether that be for consulting or advising on ESG risk, whether it's creating new products surrounding ESG risk, or if it's, I guess, expanding the reach of our data through kind of sales channels and redistribution of information. So I have a specific remit looking at certain types of certain industry participants and seeing where we can maybe find really great partnerships to help broaden that reach.
Fantastic. And could you also give us a bit more information about how this all ties in with DE&I and corporate responsibility?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, and I think there's been a lot of talk around how do all these things kind of marry together: diversity and inclusion, corporate responsibility, ESG, sustainability, impact investing. It's all really about doing better, isn't it? So for whoever it may be, yourself, for the community, for the environment, is all about doing better. So if you're linking it to diversity and inclusion, you very much see a lot of challenges and shifts happening at the moment when it comes to representation in leadership. People are wanting to see more diverse representation within all levels in an organization, particularly at the board, and it's becoming a much more ever increasingly scrutinized demographic, I think, within organizations. It's also been linked to a lot of key ESG frameworks and key considerations that really probably impact financial performance. So, things that people are looking at, the research surrounding how DE&I really does improve performance and revenue, and also then talent retention within companies too. I think from a corporate responsibility side, that's very much around policies and practices that align to positive impact. So whether that's internal or external products and services that are potentially doing harm or good to communities, whether inside or outside the company, that's one way that very much ties into sustainability. And then the general thing, again, around corporate responsibility, around activism, charitable engagements, volunteering, again, that could be aligned to specific ESG or sustainability causes. So there is a very big tie, I think, between all of those different levels.
Fantastic. And have you seen any sort of negativity with regards to the increase element of DE&I in workplace and corporate responsibilities at all?
I don't think there's been increased negativity. I think initially when it was all happening, there were groups of people who were like, what is this? Like, I just come in to do my day job. I don't need any of this drama, or not even drama. I don't need this additional thought kind of happening in my life. And there would definitely be people like that. And I'm sure there's probably still people who have that mindset. But I think really and truly overall, it's been very positive and very impactful. I think it's becoming very much part of the culture, and the identity of an organization is around what are you doing regarding diversity, how sustainable are you, what are you doing regarding ESG. I know when I was moving to an organization, that was part of the criteria when I was looking at them as a candidate. How do they fare in these different fields? Obviously they're a sustainability data company, so that helps, but there are certain factors when you look at the makeup of the leadership team, when you look at opportunities surrounding career progression and who's kind of rising and gaining opportunities, and then what is this company aligned to? Who do they advocate for? Who do they stick up for? Whatever that may be, those are becoming really important things, I think, in workplaces.
Fantastic. And you mentioned something there that sort of like just triggered a thought process in my head, in the sense that, how would somebody really get into the detail that a company is absolutely committed to DE&I with regards to moving forward, and that their career can flourish in such an environment? What sort of things do you tend to look out for?
So I think, as I said, one is kind of looking at the demographic of the organization. And I also want to ask questions as well, right? So obviously a lot of people can put stuff on their website and say what they're doing, but definitely challenging the narrative and asking questions to, in the interview process around what they're doing. Do they have, a D&I strategy within the organization? I think that's something that's quite new in a lot of firms. Maybe it was something that was done by the employee base at one period of time, but now it's become part of like the actual strategy of the organization, and there's an executive sponsor and those sorts of things. So that evolution, even if they're still starting out, knowing that there's a plan to grow and that they recognize that as an important key factor within the organization, is something that I would be really curious to learn about and see as well. But it's hard to figure it out, but they're just some things you can do.
No, absolutely. And how can one become like a champion in the D&I workplace? How would you sort of like promote diversity and inclusion?
So I think the first thing is to get involved. I think you've got to definitely be open to learning for yourself, for your colleagues, and for the clients, and also for the general good of the company. Much of the employee networks that I've attended have been because I don't really know much about certain communities or certain parts of the world. So I go and I want to be educated, and then from that I probably book a trip somewhere. So it's always quite an inspiring engagement. So definitely get involved. I'd say also ask questions. Do you feel like you belong? Do you feel like your colleagues feel like they belong? And do you feel like everyone's getting a fair chance? And the opportunity to succeed in an organization? And if not, then see how you can try to help close those gaps. So things like advocacy and creating awareness is one aspect of that. Things like education and participation. So that was a big thing that we were doing when it came to racial inclusion and diversity. Race was never a thing that came up as a topic in an organization. We could all quite happily talk about gender disparity, but race was like, that was their issue, and it was never kind of brought into the work environment. And so when that started to happen and unravel, the majority of the time was spent educating people on what this actually means for people of color. People who have faced adversity, just getting out of their door and walking down the street, like that is such an alien experience to a lot of people. So the education side of things, I think, is one thing that you can definitely do to help become an advocate. And the last thing I'd say is also just challenge the narrative and help to make change where you can, like be thoughtful and communicate well, and that definitely helps kind of spur the conversation forward.
Fantastic, brilliant. And you mentioned something else there that sort of like triggered another thought process in my head. A lot of DE&I, a lot of conversations always seems to be based around gender, men and women, but there's so much more other elements that aren't included, even though that they're being explored by companies and corporations, etc. But even things about educational backgrounds and people that have come from one part of one country to another. Have you found, certainly during your career, that there's been certain parts that aren't actually being included in the DE&I program that should get so much more promotion?
Definitely. I think it's such a wide spectrum, and a lot of the time, you only really pick up on what the people in your team or in your business are bringing to the table. So, we brought race to the table, and people brought LGBTQ to the table. But things that I think get omitted quite a lot are religious differences as well. That's one thing I don't think really gets highlighted a lot, and also age. That's something that really does not get a profile very much that I've seen, is age discrimination. And that is definitely a thing, that people are concerned about, and people, particularly with movement of jobs, like, do you feel like you can really succeed after a certain age? And if you don't really see that happening in an organization, I think this doesn't seem to be really a voice about that. So yeah, they're two that I kind of pick up on as often kind of left off the table sometimes.
I totally agree, and I think that age is something that a lot of people tend to always migrate to, sort of like the older age, rather than thinking that younger people are also discriminated against sometimes because they lack experience in certain areas. So ageism affects everybody, not just the older generation.
Yeah.
So sorry, carry on.
No, I was saying I totally agree, and I think it's becoming even harder these days as well, for people. But yeah, age is something we need to work on for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. And a little birdie tells me that you recently won an award.
Oh yes, a little.
Can we explore that, please? Come on, let's have some self-promotion here.
I know I'm not very good at stuff like that, but yes, I did win an award via Empower. They're from the Involve People, and so last year, well, I think every year they do a top 100 list of various different things, and so I was nominated by the London Stock Exchange Group for Future Leader,
Wow.
2021, and I knew I got on the list, and I was like, oh wow, I made it into this top 100 list. That's awesome. It was like sponsored by Yahoo Finance, and I kind of was just like, okay, great, like that's a great thing. And I remember one morning I got an email saying like, congratulations, you're number one. And I was half asleep, and I kind of was like, yeah, you've already told me I'm on the list. And then I went back to bed, and I woke up, I was like, oh wait a minute, they just said I placed number one. And yeah, then all hell broke loose after that. I couldn't believe what on earth was going on, but it's
wow.
And I think things like that are really special, because a lot of the time the work people do around D&I and like employee networks is alongside their day job, right? And so this is a really nice way to like say thank you for the work that you've been doing. It's very much appreciated. So I was very grateful for that honor, and got to celebrate a couple of weeks ago as well, which is great.
That is absolutely awesome, and huge congratulations to you, because I mean that is no mean feat either. That's so I think, you know, to even be nominated, never mind to come number one, is just, you know, it's mind blowing. So congratulations to you on that. Um, as a successful leader and a role model in tech, what would your advice be to future leaders?
So I would say always, always be open to learning and taking risks and opportunities. I always think like whatever happens, even if you fail, you'll still win at the same time. Like you'll learn something. So I'm very much about that. Learning allows you to expand your network, which will benefit you regardless of the outcome. So that's one thing I'd say. The other I'd say is really take time to get to know people. I think I've always taken a real interest in the people that I've engaged with, and but whether that's internal or external to my organization. And I think it really helps like build trust and establish good relationships, and it also opens up doors for other opportunities at the odd moment as well. So I think, you know, really get to know the people that surround you. And the last thing I'd say, which is very fitting today on International Women's Day, is around paying it forward. So I really like that phrase. And I'm always looking for ways to kind of help others achieve or succeed in what they're doing, whether it's with access to another person or a network or mentorship or sponsorship, whatever it may be. I think using your own talents and successes to help other people is always a really good way to kind of like keep a circle of like good faith going around. So I'd always say look for ways to pay forward when you can.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. It's been a really interesting chat. I'm sure that there's loads of information that people can take from this conversation. You're completely inspirational. Once again, congratulations on the award. I'm just smiling both externally and internally for you, because I think that it's just an absolute legend to actually get that. So well done. And thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're very welcome.